Hey folks, welcome back to the shop. So in our last video we got our recurve clip point all shaped and we got it we got our tang holes drilled, we got it heat treated, and we got it tempered. So now it's time to go ahead. We'll take our Scotch-Brite pad and we'll clean off this forge scale from heat treatment and tempering, and then we'll get the hand sanding on this thing. We want to get all the sanding done on our blade that we can and get it where we want it, because once we put our scales on we won't be able to sand that area. So here we go. Part 3. Recurve clip point knife. we've been hand sanding on this knife for about, I'm gonna say close to 4 hours. And all we've done is hit it with 220 on one side to get the grinder marks out of it, but you can see we've pretty much got the grinder marks all out. Not seeing any, because the grinder scratches would run this way. So we're not seeing any grinder marks in there anymore. My bevels look horrendous. I've really got to get better at running these bevels, because a lot of this stuff you don't see, like this dip right here, you know, a lot of that you don't see until you start sanding, get that forward scale off and really start your cleanup. And then, you know, you can see I've got a divot here and a divot right here where I started to plunge grind on that false bevel up there, false edge on that clip point. And then of course we've got here where we went too high, right here at our plunge line. And I mean, they're not horribly horrible, you know, they don't really stick out like a sore thumb, but you really want your work to be straight, and it's frustrating. I've never done a grind like this, so first time for everything, but for a recurve, first time recurve grinded, I mean, it's pretty close. It's not terrible, but a person is always their own worst critic. But here's the other side, and you can see all these grinder marks and swirls from the Scotch-Brite pad and that in there, and see, that's what we're working on right now. And to me, that's the hardest part of sanding one of these blades, is that initial sanding, because you can see here we've got rid of all of those. Now we've still got sandpaper marks going this way, but they're very light. We started with a 220. We got all that rough, those straight grinder marks out of it, and we've got those swirl marks out of it from the Scotch-Brite pad. So now we got to get to work on this side and get that done. But you know, I just wanted y'all to see, because like I've said in the past, it's, you can't show all that on video, or you'd be sitting there for hours and hours and hours watching the same video. So we show a little bit of the sanding and wet sanding and what have you, but the truth of the matter is, right about 4 hours, and all we've done on this side is get the grinder marks and the Scotch-Brite swirls out of it. And we've started with the 220, so now we've still got to go up to like 300, 400, 600, 800, and 1,000, and I've used a whole sheet, one of those little sheets I have. I don't know what they are. I think they're like 8 inch by 4 inch, and I just put them on my little stick, and I kind of wrap it around the stick, and each time where that spot that I'm on, it's a paint stick, so it's about 1 inch wide, and you just sand on that. You start at one side, you just use that entire spot of sandpaper on that till it just doesn't sand anymore, till it's just kind of smearing the black wet sand shavings around. Then I'll fold it over and do it again with a fresh place, fold it over, do it again. So that piece of sandpaper lasted me 4 hours of sanding on that thing, but we did something a little different this time. I used penetrating oil instead of Windex. The Windex dries out too fast. Of course, you can just use water, I guess, but even water just dries out too fast, and you end up going through your sandpaper a lot faster, it seems like, because that one sheet of sandpaper doing that one side of that knife with 220 lasted me almost 4 hours of just, you know, and using up every bit of it. I mean, I used the entire sheet, but it took me 4 hours with that penetrating oil. So I'm probably going to bag this for tonight. It's about time to get some dinner. But we'll be back in the morning working on it some more. It'll be all night for me. It'll be a blink of an eye for you. See you in a minute. So here we are. That's as far as we're going to hand sand this thing. We started out with just 220 grit for the initial, to cut all the scratches out of it. So we sanded on this thing for 7 hours with just the 220. We used a full sheet of 220 on each side. And I decided instead of Windex, I used some penetrating oil. Seemed to make my sandpaper last longer. You know, when you got to the point where you thought your sandpaper was completely worn out, you could squirt a little clean on there, you could wipe it off, squirt some clean penetrating oil on there, use that same spot on the sandpaper and get more out of it yet. So we used 2 full sheets of sandpaper just on the 220, one on each side. Then we started up through the grits. We went from 220 to 320, then from 320 to 400, then to 500, then to 600, 800, 1000, 1200, and finally 1500 grit. So we've got this thing hand sanded up to 1500. I think it looks pretty good. So that's where we are on this knife. Now I'm still waiting on some parts, not parts, but handle scale pieces. I've got my brass. We're going to start getting ready to do our bolsters and our pommel pieces. I've got my pin material. I've got 2 different sets of scales up there, and I haven't made up my mind yet for sure. I want to use either zebra wood or black and white ebony on this blade. Kind of leaning towards the black and white ebony, but I've ordered some scale liner material because as much work as I put into this blade, all told, I kept track of my hours. There are 13 hours of hand sanding. Now I'm not talking I sanded for an hour and then went and ate lunch for an hour and then came back or whatever. I mean just plain old constant hand sanding with a piece of sandpaper wrapped around a stick. I didn't count the time that I was off for a half an hour eating my lunch or anything like that. And this took me over a period of 3 days because I couldn't, that stuff bent over like that and sanding on that for hours on end is so hard on your back. My back, maybe not be hard on yours, but it's very hard on mine. And it gets to my shoulders and my forearms in here and the sides of my triceps from just this motion, you know. You just got that sandpaper wrapped around and you're just doing this for just hours and hours. So it was over a 3-day period from the time we started this video till last night. I finished this off last night. Was it last night? No, Thursday night. I worked yesterday, so I finished this off Thursday night, and then I had to work yesterday, and so now it's Saturday. So here we go with the finish. I mean, you can really get quite a shine. I could go on up to 3,000 grit, but at that fine a grit, your buffing wheel with a little rouge on it will do a better job and be more efficient and faster than sitting there with those fine grits, because you only get 8 or 10 strokes on that and you can already feel that the sandpaper has pretty much worn out at that fine a grit. I mean, the 1500, I had to use an entire sheet to get both sides of the knife because it would wear out so fast. So, but you know, it came out really nice. Now we're still gonna hit that on the buffer. I'll probably wait to hit it on the buffer until after I have the handles done. I mean, I do need to buff it. After I get the brass on, I'll buff it up real nice. I'll buff the brass up, get it shaped up and buffed up real nice. But I put so much work into sanding on this knife that I want it to be as perfect as I can get it when it's done. So before I can shape my brass, see, when we did this chopper and we did that brass, I did that freehand basically on the belt grinder, you know, pinning my two brass pieces together and shaping them on that belt grinder, and I did it freehand. And if you look really closely, you can see the tiniest little spot, you know, where it's off. I mean, you really have to look for it, but nonetheless, you can see it. With this knife here, I want those brass pieces to match perfectly. So, a long time ago, I bought an extra bar for my belt grinder to make a tool rest, but I've never made the tool rest yet. So we went Thursday, and I bought a piece of 1/4 inch plate, and I bought a piece of 1/8 inch plate for a floor pan for the little monster truck here. That's kind of been holding us up on that. I needed that floor pan so that I can go ahead and start framing this in the way we want it to make that body sit on there. But anyway, so I've got a piece of 1/4 inch, I've got the bolts that I need, I've already got the toolbar, so I'm gonna have to make a tool rest before I start on the finished work on this knife, because I want to make the brass parts perfect. So we're gonna end this video here, guys. Probably wasn't very interesting, just hand sanding, it never is. But I think that the finished product really speaks for itself when you look at how, I mean, you can't find a grinder mark in there. Now you can see the light little, just hazy light little scratches running lengthwise on the blade from sanding it. But that's where that buffer comes in. Now these are so small and so barely noticeable that that buffer will clean that right up. So we're gonna go ahead, I'm gonna make this thing a mirror. I haven't done that in a long time. I'm gonna make this blade a freaking mirror. You're gonna be able to brush your teeth and comb your hair in that thing. So, but like I say, I wanna get my brass on first, so we're gonna do a video right after this. We're gonna make a video of making that tool rest for that. So I appreciate y'all being here. I know this is kind of a boring, short little video, not much to see, a little hand sanding and goofing around, but it's hard to get the point across of how long and how hard it is to get that you know, to get a blade cleaned up, get all those grinder marks out of it and everything. So thanks again for being here, guys. Get out to your shop and do something, tear something up, fix something, clean your shop, whatever it takes. Just get out there and let your cares roll away and have a good time. Safe when you're working in your shop. Use your safety gear. Take care of yourselves, and we'll see you on the next one.